Welcome to This Day in His Story, created by American Heritage Worldwide, a reminder that every day holds something new to learn. Did you know that vanilla has been the world's most popular ice cream flavor for more than 200 years? Learn how vanilla was once considered one of the rarest and most valuable spices in the world. Learn that Thomas Jefferson made vanilla ice cream popular in the United States after returning from France, and that Jefferson's original handwritten vanilla ice cream recipe is preserved in the Library of Congress. Discover that today there are an estimated 18,000 products that contain vanilla flavoring, with vanilla ice cream as the most popular flavor in America.
You know, there is this incredibly specific and I guess almost universal sensation when you are holding a cone of ice cream on a really, really hot summer day.
Oh, yeah. It is essentially a race against thermodynamics.
Right. It's that frantic licking before the whole thing just, completely runs down your knuckles and ruins your shirt.
I mean, we've all been there. It's a mess.
It really is. And in that moment, you are entirely focused on the present, just the physical, sugary coldness of it all. You don't think about literally anything else.
No, of course not. It feels incredibly simple.
Exactly, simple. But the second you look at what is actually inside that scoop of vanilla ice cream, that simplicity just completely vanishes.
It totally does.
Yeah.
Because you aren't just eating a dessert, right? You are tasting a history that is, well, it's tangled. It's geographically massive and shockingly complex.
Yeah, and since July 23rd happens to be National Vanilla Ice Cream Day, we are dedicating our time today to the undisputed heavyweight champion of flavors.
Over 200 years at the top.
Right. For over 200 years, vanilla has just reigned supreme. So, okay, let's unpack this. Our mission for today's deep dive is to explore how a simple scoop of vanilla ice cream connects ancient Mexican civilizations, a centuries-long botanical mystery, a massive presidential obsession, and incredibly ancient scripture.
It is such a remarkable journey. We're going to be diving into a bunch of sources today. We've got historical agricultural records, the actual personal inventory lists of Thomas Jefferson.
Which are wild, by the way.
Oh, totally wild.
Yeah.
We have early culinary records, recipe videos, and even biblical texts. So we are going to examine both the literal physical history of how vanilla conquered the globe and then kind of pivot to the more philosophical concept of humanity's desperate, exhaustive search for sweetness.
I love that framing, because to understand how vanilla ice cream actually took over the world, we first have to figure out where vanilla came from in the first place.
Right, and why it was so difficult to grow.
Yeah, why for a very long time it was basically impossible to cultivate anywhere else. We really have to go back to the beginning.
And that beginning takes us to modern-day Veracruz, Mexico.
Okay, so the historical timeline starts with the Totonite people.
Right,
Yeah.
yes, exactly. They are credited as being the absolute earliest growers of vanilla.
Though, it is worth noting that the oldest actual reports of vanilla being used go back even further, like to the pre-Columbian Maya.
Right, so this flavor, this ingredient that we now associate with, I don't know, fancy French bakeries and American summer days,
Yeah.
it is deeply rooted in ancient Mesoamerican civilization. It was a highly prized botanical treasure.
Wow.
And like many treasures of the Americas, its trajectory changed violently with European colonization. Because in 1519, the Spanish conquered the Aztecs.
Right, and as part of that conquest, they encountered vanilla, and they basically just packed it up and brought it back across the Atlantic to Europe.
They did. But here is where the story hits a massive, centuries-long roadblock.
Yeah, because you would think, okay, the Spanish bring it back, the elite European botanists plant it, and boom, vanilla is everywhere.
You would think that.
But if you look at the botanical records from the 1700s, you see this massive, heavily funded panic. Because the elite French and English botanical gardeners completely, totally failed to grow vanilla successfully.
Yeah, they could keep the plant alive sometimes, but it simply would not produce those precious vanilla pods. It just wouldn't do it.
It's crazy.
It completely baffled the greatest scientific minds of Europe for literally hundreds of years. They were missing a crucial piece of the puzzle.
You know, the way I think about this, because it's so frustrating to even imagine, it's like, okay, imagine you travel overseas and you buy this wildly expensive, absolute cutting-edge piece of technology.
Okay, I'm with you.
Like a gadget that does something nothing else can do.
Yeah.
You carefully pack it up, you bring it all the way home, you unbox it, and you realize, wait, I don't have the charging cable.
Oh, man. That is a very apt analogy. Because the vine itself was only half of the biological equation.
Right. And it gets worse. Because you go to the store and you find out the company doesn't even sell that highly specific proprietary charging cable on your entire continent.
Yeah, you're just stuck.
You just have this beautiful, completely useless vine sitting in your greenhouse.
What's fascinating here is what that biological charging cable actually was.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't about the soil or the temperature or the water.
Well, not entirely, at least.
Not entirely. It was about a highly specific, symbiotic relationship that the Europeans completely overlooked. And it wasn't until 1836, in Belgium of all places, that the biological lock was finally understood.
Wait, Belgium? So what was it?
A bug. Specifically, the Melipona bee. You see, vanilla is an orchid.
Wait, I need to pause you right there. If it's a flower, doesn't it naturally want to be pollinated? I mean, why would an orchid make it so incredibly difficult to reproduce?
Well, it does want to reproduce, but it wants to ensure genetic diversity.
Yeah.
So the anatomy of the vanilla orchid flower is incredibly complex.
Okay.
It has this physical barrier called the rostellum. It's essentially a tiny flap of plant tissue that sits right between the male pollen and the female stigma.
Oh, wow. So it's actively preventing self-pollination.
Precisely. It literally forces the plant to rely on an outside agent to carry pollen from one flower to a completely different flower.
And that outside agent was the bee.
Yes. In Mexico, the Melipona bee had evolved perfectly alongside the vanilla orchid with a natural pollinator. It was actually the only insect with the exact right size, shape, and weight to lift that little flap inside the flower and transfer the pollen.
So the Europeans took the plant, but they literally left the bee behind.
Exactly. And the Melipona bee simply did not live in Europe. So without the bee, there was no pollination.
Wow.
And without pollination, there were no vanilla pods. The European botanists were trying to operate a machine without the one microscopic key required to turn it on.
So, okay, if Europe didn't have the Melipona bee, and I assume they couldn't get the bees to survive a transatlantic ship ride back then.
No, definitely not.
Right. So how did vanilla eventually become the global juggernaut it is today? I mean, today there are an estimated 18,000 products that contain vanilla flavoring. You just can't achieve that level of market saturation if you can't actually grow the plant on a massive scale.
No, you really cannot. And the economic desperation of the French colonies at the time was just at a boiling point. They desperately needed agricultural exports.
So who finally figured it out?
Well, the answer to their problem didn't come from a royal botanist in London or Paris. It came from an island in the Indian Ocean called Reunion in the year 1841.
And it wasn't a scientist who figured it out either. It was a child, an enslaved boy named Edmund Albius.
Yes. Edmund Albius was 12 years old at the time.
Okay.
12. And he did what centuries of European science could not do. He developed a highly effective, incredibly reliable method for hand-pollinating the vanilla orchid.
I really need to push back on the history books here for a second, because the staggering irony of this is almost hard to swallow.
It really is.
You have centuries of elite, heavily funded royal botanical societies, men with basically limitless resources and libraries full of books studying this plant and failing completely.
Over and over again.
Right. And then you have a 12-year-old enslaved boy on a remote island. He doesn't have a laboratory. He doesn't have funding. What he has is brilliant observation and his own two hands. So how exactly did he do it?
He figured out how to replicate the work of the Melipona bee using practically nothing. Edmund Albius realized that if he used a thin stick, or even just a piece of grass, he could gently lift the rostellum, that little flap we talked about inside the orchid flower.
Okay.
And once the flap was out of the way, he just used his thumb to smear the male pollen directly over the female stigma.
Just a stick in his thumb.
That's it.
And the craziest part, his exact technique is still used today.
It is.
Over 180 years later, that 12-year-old boy's method is exactly how we get our natural vanilla.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the global impact of Albius's invention is almost impossible to overstate.
I mean, it changed everything.
Completely. This hand pollination technique quickly spread from Reunion to neighboring islands like Madagascar.
Which is still a massive producer of vanilla today, right?
Absolutely. It's single-handedly developed the entire world's appetite for vanilla. It transformed this rare, geographically locked curiosity into a massive global commodity.
It is just incredible. Okay, so Edmund Albius unlocks the vanilla bean for the world. But eating a vanilla pod isn't exactly a summer treat.
No, it's quite bitter on its own.
Right, so how does that incredibly hard-won flavor make the leap into our frozen desserts? Like, how do we get to ice cream?
Well, to understand that leap, we have to look at the culinary evolution of ice cream itself. Ice cream actually originated with the European tradition of custard desserts made with eggs.
Right, so we aren't talking about, like, flavored shaved ice here. We are starting with something rich, thick, and creamy.
Exactly. These were extremely luxurious items. Ice cream recipes began appearing in French cookbooks in the late 17th century, and then in English cookbooks in the early 18th century. It was a very slow process of culinary refinement. As vanilla became slightly more available, though remember, it was still incredibly expensive before Albius's discovery.
Yeah, basically worth its weight in gold.
Pretty much. But it started to be used to flavor these rich egg custards.
Wait, I'm stuck on the logistics here. If we're talking about the 1700s and early 1800s, how are they freezing a rich egg custard in the middle of summer without electricity or modern refrigeration?
It required a deep understanding of chemistry. You can't just put a bowl of cream on a block of ice. It won't freeze fast enough. It'll just sit there.
Oh, right.
You need an endothermic reaction.
Because salt lowers the freezing point of water.
Exactly. They would take a large wooden bucket, fill it with crushed ice, and pour a massive amount of salt over it.
Okay, I've seen people do this with the hand crank machines.
Right. The salt forces the ice to melt, but the resulting saltwater slush drops to a temperature significantly below freezing. It creates an intensely cold environment. Then, you place a sealed metal container filled with your vanilla custard directly into that slush and spin it. The metal transfers the cold from the slush into the custard rapidly, freezing it into ice cream.
That sounds like an exhausting amount of physical labor just for dessert.
Oh, it was brutal, which is why it was a delicacy reserved for the incredibly wealthy.
Yeah.
And that brings us to North America.
Okay.
Vanilla began to appear in American ice cream recipes in the 1760s. But it was really a specific founding father who pushed it into the mainstream.
Here's where it gets really interesting. We are talking about Thomas Jefferson.
Yes. Jefferson is a pivotal figure in the American popularization of this dessert. During his time serving as a diplomat in France, he developed an absolute love for vanilla ice cream.
A deep, abiding obsession from the sound of it. I mean, he wasn't just casually ordering it. He wanted to replicate it at his home, Monticello, in Virginia.
He did. And the historical record here is remarkably specific. We actually have the lists of items Jefferson explicitly shipped from France all the way to Virginia just for the purpose of making and eating ice cream.
Just imagine the effort and cost of shipping these items across the Atlantic in the late 18th century.
It's mind-blowing.
Just to have a cold dessert in the Virginia summer.
Right.
So what exactly did he ship over?
The inventory records show he shipped 4 moules à glace, which translates to 4 ice molds. He also brought over 2 freezing molds and 4 other unspecified ice molds.
But these weren't just standard wooden bowls, though, right?
Yeah.
Why go through the trouble of shipping specific French molds?
Because of the material. These molds were typically made of pewter.
Oh, yeah.
Pewter was crucial because, as a metal, it transfers cold incredibly fast. So going back to that endothermic reaction we discussed, if you want your custard to freeze smoothly before the ice in your bucket completely melts away, you need a container that conducts temperature highly efficiently.
So he is basically importing top-tier scientific equipment for his kitchen.
He essentially was.
Oh.
And he was setting up a serious high-tech production line at Monticello. And it continued well after his time in France. An 1826 inventory of the contents of Martha Jefferson's Monticello kitchen explicitly included an ice cream freezer and an ice cream ladle. This was deeply integrated into the household's culinary life.
And when he became president, visitors frequently reported being served ice cream at his estate.
Right.
Yes.
Exactly.
But it wasn't just the hardware, it was the software too, the recipes.
Precisely. Among the dozens of recipes preserved in Thomas Jefferson's papers, one of them is specifically for vanilla ice cream.
Which is amazing.
And in fact, that original handwritten recipe is currently housed in the Library of Congress.
That is just so cool. Think about how you eat vanilla ice cream today. Whether you're like a purist who eats it plain to appreciate that complex flavor Edmund Albius unlocked for us, or you bury it under chocolate syrup and sprinkles, you are participating in this massive historical chase for sweetness.
You really are.
We've traveled from ancient Mexico to a botanical puzzle in Europe to an enslaved genius in the Indian Ocean to Thomas Jefferson shipping pewter molds across the Atlantic. All of that immense human effort, sailing across oceans and hand-pollinating tiny orchids just for this one specific sweet experience.
But the actual experience of eating it, as we noted at the very beginning of this deep dive, is fundamentally temporary.
Right. It lasts maybe 5 minutes. It's a fleeting joy. It melts. It's gone.
Exactly.
And that fleeting nature is actually what makes the final piece of this puzzle so interesting. So what does this all mean? Why spend so much time establishing humanity's obsession with physical sweetness in our sources today?
Because it forces us to consider the concept of sweetness on an entirely different level. The physical sweetness of vanilla is temporary, but the historical texts we are examining today draw a direct comparison between that physical sensation and a more profound, enduring kind of sweetness found in ancient scripture.
Let's look at the specific scriptural texts provided in the sources.
Okay, so we are looking at Psalm 19, specifically verse 10. This psalm is discussing the commandments and judgments of God.
Right.
And it says this about them. More to be desired are they than gold, yea, than much fine gold. Sweeter also than honey and the honeycomb.
Sweeter also than honey and the honeycomb. I just love that phrasing. It takes something that at the time was the absolute pinnacle of physical sweetness, honey, and uses it as a baseline to describe something completely intangible.
It really does. And it raises an important question about what we value and how we measure reward.
Yeah.
The text invites us to do a bit of philosophical heavy lifting here. It asks us to contrast the fleeting temporary reward of eating something delicious like vanilla ice cream with the rich, longer-lasting spiritual reward of keeping God's commandments.
It's a brilliant juxtaposition because, no one denies that ice cream is sweet. It is. We literally just spent 10 minutes talking about how humanity literally moved heaven and earth, shipped ice molds across the ocean, and spent centuries trying to cultivate vanilla just to capture that sweetness. We want it so badly. But the ancient text is arguing that the desire to keep the commandments is richer and fundamentally sweeter than any botanical flavor we could ever extract.
And the historical reflection here poses a few direct questions from the source material that I think are well worth considering, perhaps even discussing with a family member or a friend after you finish listening today.
Okay, what are they?
The questions are, in what ways are you rewarded for keeping God's commandments? And are those benefits as sweet as eating ice cream? Do they last longer?
I think the do they last longer part is the linchpin of the whole argument here.
How so?
Well, because the ice cream is gone in a matter of minutes, right? The sugar rush fades, you're left holding an empty, sticky cone. But the peace of mind, the integrity, the spiritual grounding that the text suggests comes from living a principled life, that is a sweetness that doesn't melt in the sun.
That's a great point.
It doesn't rely on a transatlantic shipment or a highly specific bee or a complicated endothermic reaction in a wooden bucket to exist.
It's internal.
It is a sustainable sweetness, and I think that's the core message the text is trying to convey by placing these two ideas side by side. We can, and absolutely should, appreciate the incredible history and physical joy of something like vanilla ice cream.
Oh, absolutely.
The ingenuity of Edmund Albius is immensely worth celebrating. But we should also recognize that the deepest, most enduring rewards in life are not consumed. They are lived.
Wow. That is a lot to chew on, or I guess a lot to let melt on your tongue.
Yeah.
We have covered an incredible amount of ground today in this deep dive, from the ancient Totonac and Maya peoples cultivating a mysterious vine in Mesoamerica to the missing Melipona bee frustrating the greatest scientific minds of Europe.
And then, of course, the breakthrough. Right. We looked at the world-changing innovation of a 12-year-old enslaved boy named Edmund Albius, without whom none of us would be eating vanilla today. We explored the complex chemistry of freezing custards in the 18th century, Thomas Jefferson's obsession and his French ice molds, and his Library of Congress recipe.
And finally, we reflected on Psalm 19 and the vital difference between fleeting physical joy and lasting spiritual sweetness.
Exactly. And for those of you who want to take this deep dive directly into your own kitchen, there are highly practical resources available in the sources we reviewed. There are recipe videos that can actually walk you through the process of making vanilla ice cream yourself.
Yeah, including one a very specific video that details Thomas Jefferson's exact historical recipe in just 1 minute and 19 seconds.
Which is incredible to think about. You can literally eat the exact dessert that was served at Monticello using the flavor profile unlocked by Edmund Albius.
It is a profoundly tangible way to connect with the history we've discussed today.
It really is. So as we wrap up today, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over, one last connection to draw. We mentioned that Edmund Albius's hand pollination method from 1841 is still in use today.
Right.
Think about what that actually means in a practical sense. Practically every single time you taste the natural flavor of vanilla, that fleeting, rapidly melting sweetness on a hot July day, you are physically benefiting from a direct chain of human touch.
That's a powerful image.
A chain that links you, directly and physically, back to the uncredited genius of an enslaved child. Knowing the profound, complex human history that is required to produce just one single drop of that flavor, does it change how sweet it tastes to you?
That's a question worth asking.
It really is. Until next time, keep digging, keep questioning, and enjoy the deep dive.
Thank you for joining us for this day in His story. May the lessons of yesterday inspire you to see God's hand today and to play your part in His story now. For more faith-based learning, visit ahsworldwide.org, the homeschool for faith and family.